I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning. Jeff's out of town for this entire week and next Sunday. So we'll take a look at some of the things. We'll be starting on lesson 71, page 3, after we go through a little bit of background material up to this point on this less than 24-hour period that we're looking at now. Before we begin this morning, Alan, would you lead us in a word of prayer, please? Amen. Now, just a little bit of background here, and if you're toward the front, you should be able to see it. If you're in the back, I doubt if you can see it at all. But remember, the Passover meal began around 1800 on Thursday evening. The washing of the feet, the tray are identified, and the various things, and then the questions. By the way, the meal beginning and questions answered, that was something that was normal for the Passover celebration. The patriarch of the family would entertain questions and also singing a hymn. Singing hymns at the Passover feast. But anyway, the Lord's Supper instituted, then the travel to the Garden of Gethsemane with John recording several discourses that Jesus gave there. And I apologize, highlighting doesn't work too good, and I forgot that when I put this together. But then midnight till about 3 o'clock, as this says, some of these things may have been pushed over to after midnight, but when you start looking at the times, probably not. Peter's first denial would have been about 3 o'clock. The cock crow may have been a literal cock crow. It also may have been the way the Romans did their watches. They call it a cock crow, a galleon. Did I? No. Okay. So nobody else is going to dispute that. It's in here now, I don't think. So the Gethsemane prayer, which took a while because the first prayer we know was over an hour long. The second and third may have been less than that, probably was. Peter's first denial, the trial before Annas, which were basically happening at the same time. They were parallel. That's why this section is highlighted. It's simultaneous. John puts the denial before he records Annas' trial. So it's sometime in there, and it's about 3 o'clock. And then the trial before Caiaphas, somewhere shortly after 3 o'clock. And then Peter's other 2 denials, the last denial, being about daybreak, may have been a little bit before before 6 o'clock. Remember, this is right after the vernal equinox, so the days would have been equal, so you'd have had about 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of nighttime. And because of that, remember, and north is this way. This is the only map I found that was decent enough to fit on a 9x16 and be able to possibly read it. But possibly the Last Supper was in this area, in the upper city. They would have gone out from there and down to the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus would have been arrested, and they would have taken him back. This possibly was where the house of Caiaphas was. Basically, they returned to about the same place that they were. And we'll look at, and then we've also covered, they had the council meeting at daybreak around 6 o'clock. That was probably in the council chambers over on the Temple Mount. And then they went back possibly to Herod's palace, where Pilate usually resided, or they might have, some say, possibly to the fortress of Antonia, whichever the place. One of the two places is probably where they brought Pilate. They brought Jesus before Pilate. Peter's repentance, the formal meeting that we just talked about, and then the remorse and suicide of Judas, Pilate's trial, Herod's trial, Pilate's second trial, the mocking and the journey to Golgotha. This happened simultaneously. We really don't know exactly when Judas gave the money back, and committed suicide, and it may have even been while Jesus was hanging upon the cross. The way that it's recorded right after the formal meeting of the Sanhedrin, which very possibly may have been when it occurred. So we're in this section here. We've talked about the trial of Herod, so we'll go down. One thing that we need to know is the number of times that Pilate told them, "I find no guilt in him." It goes on, nothing deserving of death, no guilt in him. Herod hasn't found any guilt in him either, nothing deserving of death. And then Pilate tried to release Barabbas. And again, he says, "I find no guilt in him." And then we're down right about here. Carlin, you want to take number 3 there?
Did the Jews immediately tell Pilate that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God? Not, why not? So no, because in Luke 23, verse 2, he claimed that he was calling himself king, so that would have helped their Roman narrative.
Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't a crime to claim to be the Son of God. A person might think they're crazy, but it was not illegal. They gave charges to Pilate, which were somewhat leading to sedition and or treason, not paying taxes, urging folks not to pay taxes, and that he claimed to be a king, and that he was causing disturbances. So those things are all things that they actually brought before the Roman government because those were crimes. But the real reason they were wanting to crucify Jesus was that they believed that he was blaspheming, which was a capital offense under the Mosaical law. The only problem was that Jesus is the Son of God, therefore that was not blasphemy. That was just telling the truth. Number 3, Eric. I guess I kind of answered that question, didn't I? But go ahead, Eric. Number 4.
Why do you charges are brought can we submit at least 3? And I found during 1907 and 1912, I think one of the charges that is brought, like we have a law that he claimed to be the Son of God, and that is the setting of death. And then they also said that if you believe Jesus, and he's not a friend of Caesar because he's a king.
Okay. So that's it's also interesting that the kingship is something that of Jesus is the first thing that he questioned Jesus on. And the famous statement, if I can find the right button, what is truth? What is truth? Jesus answered a good bit under John's record. The Synoptic Gospels all just says it isn't. But it is not there in the Greek. It's as you say, basically, or you say. But the implication there is, it is as you say. But in John's Gospel, Jesus makes it very clear that his is a spiritual kingdom, not an earthly kingdom. And the idea of truth, what is truth? And that is the question that our eternal destinies pivot upon. And of course, after that, that's why Pilate said he found no guilt in him. Being a spiritual king was not a crime. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I keep getting the questions, don't I? Chris, you want to do number 5?
Pilate asked what is truth. Was he sincere in asking this question, or was this said in jest? I've always taken it as a sincere question.
Yeah. We don't know. We can't tell the intonation. It's possibly a doubting thing. What is truth? It could be what is truth. We don't know, but that is the pivotal question of the ages, as I said. Maybe I better look at the next question before I go on. Renee, you want to take one? No? Okay. Roger, number 6.
What did Pilate hear that led him to conclude that Jesus should be sent to Herod Antipas? Galilee was in Herod's jurisdiction.
Yeah. verse 5 of Luke 23. But they kept on insisting. He stirs up the people teaching all over Judea, starting from Galilee, even as far as this place. So since Galilee was in Herod's jurisdiction and Pilate really didn't want anything going on, didn't really want to bother himself. And again, about what time was this? What? No, this is after the council, the formal council at daybreak. So this is probably in the 6:30-ish, 7 o'clock in the morning time frame. It might be even 6:15. Depends on where from the council room where the praetorium that they were talking about was, whether it's in Herod's palace or whether it's in the fortress of Antonia. So you've got that travel time to take into consideration. But it was just a quick rubber stamp at the Daylight Council meeting. So this is very early in the morning because for Jesus to be on the cross about 9 o'clock, he has to go to Pilate, then Herod, and then back to Pilate. The scourging has to take place. This is happening quickly, folks. That's the idea that we need to remember. This is not time to stop. This is going quickly. In a matter of 3 hours, you go from the Daylight Council to Jesus upon the cross. And there's travel times associated with each time the venue is changed. So it is very quick, and we need to keep that in mind. In point of fact, what we have recorded may be almost all that was said. And if you try to read this, how long does it take you to read this? 5 minutes maybe? It's quick. So the pivotal event in the history of mankind, the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, trial here before Pilate and Herod and Pilate again, is very, very quick. Not much time elapses at all. Number 7, Phil.
Why did you ever want to see Jesus? He long desired to see him. He had heard of him, want to see his son. Did Jesus grant his request? No, I think. People see Jesus for wrong reasons today. I think yes. That's a long discussion. What are some reasons for seeking God and Jesus that are not proper? So, obviously, things that maybe tickle our fancy or maybe are not related necessarily to the point of why Jesus was here.
Yeah. As Paul says, wanting your ears tickled, entertainment, social status, business connections. None of those have any relationship to spiritual worship. Any other comments on that? Chris, you look like you want to make something. No? Okay. So, again, remember that when he was at Herod's soldiers that were with him treated Christ with contempt, mocked him, and dressed him in a gorgeous robe, they say. The New American Standard translates. What's the American Standard translate that as? Chris?
Which verse?
Verse 11. Luke 23:11.
23:11. Herod with his soldiers set him at naught and mocked him and arrayed him in gorgeous apparel, sent him back to Pilate.
Amazing. New American Standard said exactly the same thing for gorgeous. But again, it was, some have speculated it might have even been an old discarded robe of Herod himself. But again, mocking him because he said he was king of the Jews, in that mocking contempt, the ill treatment that he took. Lynn, number 8.
Herod, with his men of war due to the Lord, they treated him with contempt and mocked him. What was the consequence of the interaction between Herod and Pilate? They became friends with each other.
Okay. I need to read those questions, don't I? I answered that question again mostly. But they were at odds, and this brought them together. Okay. Number 9. John, do you have that? Yeah. Yeah. He knew that the reason was envy that they had. Both Matthew and Mark mentioned that it was because of envy that the Jews delivered Jesus up for trial. Oops, wrong way. So again, no charges, but the idea of releasing a prisoner is now, Pilate is just trying to get out of this any way that he can. He had the power to acquit Jesus. However, his weakness of character did not allow him to. Oh yeah, Reggie.
His wife told him, I have nothing to do with this man. Even that was probably something that was on his mind. His wife in his ear saying, do not do anything to this man, Jesus.
Yeah. So Reggie, you want to take the next question there?
Why did the crowds ask for Barabbas to be released? What had Barabbas been guilty of? The name of these three things. I think it was far about the crowd. The crowd got the red up to do so. And he was accused of insurrection, murder, and robbery. So you have this man that was known to have these three things, and then an innocent man that did nothing. And they rather have that than the other.
Yeah. So again, the chief priests and the elders persuaded or stirred up the multitude to ask for Barabbas. They were the instigators. The crowd was a mob mentality. Again, this is early in the morning and folks have been up the previous evening until midnight celebrating the Passover feast. So it is early, and so who you had out there were basically a mob at that time. So they asked for Barabbas, a murderer, and an insurrectionist. Any other comments on this section? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just reading the verse you just put out, Elder Luke chapter 23, verse 18. I think reading our verse can tell, I like to see through the intent of
more expedient for one man to die than the whole nation be lost.
Well,
Yeah.
another thought, I was thinking about what you said, things are moving quickly. Another thought might be that with Jesus being in agony, may not have, I don't know, felt the quickness as much, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Linda, you want to take the first question there on the next.
What did the soldiers of the governor do to Jesus after they scorched him? Can you enumerate the related events in order? They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him. They reaped a crown of thorns and placed it on his head. They put a reed in his hand. They kneeled down before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they spat on him and took the reed and began to beat him on the head.
Now, when this happened, the Synoptic Gospels puts it after Pilate pronounced his sentence, which was the normal thing. The prisoners who were condemned to crucifixion were normally scourged before they were crucified, so that makes sense, although when you look at the way that it says it, it doesn't necessarily, the then would indicate possibly, but John's gospel puts it before the final verdict as another way that Pilate is trying to dissuade the Jews from having him crucify Christ. But note, how big was the Roman cohort? It depends on what time. Early during Augustus's time, it was a larger number than it was at this time. But what is a Roman cohort?
Up to 700,000 soldiers.
Yeah, 600 to 1,000. Under Augustus, it was a full 1,000, but by this time it had come down to about 600 or 700. So roughly a battalion-size unit is what it is. It says the whole Roman cohort. When we think about this, we think about 2 or 3. Now the whole cohort would not have been there, but everybody that was off duty at that time, everybody at least of the guard for Pilate, which would have probably been company size, probably up to 100. A good many of them. When it's the whole Roman cohort that began beating him on the head with the reed. It's not just 1 or 2. It's going to be 10, 20, 30, maybe up to 100. Just as the number that came out to arrest Jesus would have been probably in the 100 to 200. Again, it's talking about, it talks about a cohort there. Although the word there, sparia, can mean a detachment from there. It means a unit. So we're talking about a goodly number of people doing this. And every time that reed hit on the head, those thorns beat down into the sensitive skin on the top of the head.
Right, this was like a sports event. This was an entertainment type of thing they would do. So
Yeah.
this was like, Coliseum type of thing. This was entertainment for them. This is how they used Jesus as a form of entertainment.
Yeah. emphasize this. Now, again, the context will drive it. It's not going to be a full 600. It can't be, because there were other folks that had duty. Remember the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread was occurring, and Josephus estimates about how many people came to that. Yeah, Roger.
I don't know, I was going to comment about something.
Okay, well, let's see. Chris? Oh, Phil, what'd you say?
What's the question again? I'm sorry.
How many people does Josephus estimate came to the Passover and unleavened bread? It's about somewhere in the area of 1 million. Lynn was right.
I was going to say million. No,
Yeah.
I was going to say million.
It was. So this was at least tripling the population of Jerusalem. So there were a lot of people there. So you had the cohort out in the areas, making sure that nothing was happening. But still, there's a lot of people that are doing that. Note that Mark uses the word claim, Matthew uses mocking, and this is mocking over here. Acclaim him, hail, King of the Jews. Obviously, that's facetious or sarcastic when they're saying that. What does the American Standard say in Mark 15:18? I'll get to you right after this, Roger.
We're 15, 18.
Yeah.
And they begin to salute him, hail, King of the Jews.
Okay. Salute, acclaim, it's the same idea of heart. They're not genuine in that. It's a mocking type thing. Yeah, Roger.
Pilate might have been concerned about not having enough people in that cohort to keep control of the Jews there, but I think he was more concerned, more than likely, about if word got to Caesar that he couldn't control the situation, that he would possibly be removed from his position.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And what ultimately happened to Pilate? Anyone remember? They finally decided that he wasn't taking care of the situation in Judea well enough. It was several years after Christ's crucifixion, however. He was sent back to Rome, and he was allowed to commit suicide. So, his wife was correct. She did suffer many things because of this just man. So again,
Pilate also had some pressure from his own wife
yeah,
on what he was going to do
yeah,
about Jesus,
yeah.
but it didn't seem to bother him very much.
Well, that's already the train's too far out of the station by the time that's happening. The chief priests were stirring up the crowd, and while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him saying, "Have nothing to do with this righteous man, for the last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him." And then probably it goes on to the scourging. But again, he's just desperately trying not to condemn Christ. No, let's see. Okay. But even after the scourging, Pilate says again, "I found no guilt in him." While they're saying, "Give us Barabbas," and crucify Christ, that's what's happening. And this is where they finally talk about the fact that he makes himself out to be the Son of God. And that really shocked Pilate. Justin doesn't really ask any questions about this. But again, this is where Christ says, you would have no authority over me unless it had been given you from above. For this reason you delivered me up to you as the greater sin. And Pilate keeps trying to release Jesus. His instincts were right. His courage wasn't there. Now, someone explain John 19:14.
What do you mean that explain it?
Well, explain it. Isn't this a little bit before the third hour? The Synoptics say it's a little bit before the third hour. When was John writing? When did John write his gospel? Probably simultaneous with Revelation and the epistles, which would have placed it about when?
86.
Say again?
86.
Later than that.
95.
If you take an early date for Revelation, it would be AD 60. But somebody said 90 over here, I think, Carlin. It would have been in the 90s, probably, plus or minus a couple of years. What had happened in the 60s? Well, Nero was from about the mid-50s to a little bit after the mid-60s. But what had happened in Titus and Vespasian are who you need to concentrate on.
70, the temples.
Say again?
In 70, the temple was destroyed.
Yeah, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And by that, there could no longer be any Mosaical law because there were no priests. The Mosaical law was predicated on the Aaronical priesthood. The Jewish celebrations of Passover could not be properly accomplished. Jews are still celebrating the Passover today, but it's not proper because the sacrifices for the Feast of Unleavened Bread cannot be accomplished today. There's no priest, there's no Levitic, there's no Aaronic priesthood. John was writing at the end of the century, after the temple had been destroyed. He's writing to a predominantly Gentile audience, probably. He's using Roman time here, which started at midnight. So it's a little bit after the 6th hour. It's probably before 8 o'clock. It's probably even before 7:30. But this is an apparent discrepancy in the Bible, and people will bring that up at times when they're trying to discredit the Bible. And so we need to be aware of that. Do you have anything to add to that, Chris?
What
Okay.
is the discrepancy you're referring to?
We're talking before 9 o'clock, the third hour, which is Jewish timekeeping. Here, you have John saying it's around the 6th hour. The 6th hour in Jewish timekeeping would have been about noon. It wasn't noon. Jesus had been on the cross for 3 hours at that point in time. So that's, you need to read and you need to harmonize. That's why we're using a harmony of the Gospels. You have to look at those things. Say again?
You could use Jewish time, or you could use Roman.
Yeah. And John would have probably been using Roman time there. Yeah, Chris?
In Mark 15:25, to answer Don's question, when they put Jesus on the cross, it was the 3rd hour. But John says it's the 6th hour, so we go from 6 down to 3. So that's the apparent discrepancy. Mark is using Hebrew time and John is using Roman time.
Yep. And we need to be aware of that. Number 3, Christopher. Or, oh, I'm sorry, number 2. Simon of Cyrene, Libya. So again, Christ had been up for over 24 hours at this time. He'd been intensively praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. Sweat as of blood was occurring then. It had the mock trials during the night, a kangaroo court after daybreak, being struck, starting at the time that he went to Annas' trial around 3 o'clock in the morning, and finally being scourged by Pilate, which again, several of the people that were scourged died before they could be crucified because of that horrendous thing. So he is exhausted. It doesn't say that Simon of Cyrene was compelled because Christ couldn't. However, we make a pretty good inference there because John tells us that he was bearing his own cross. So for some amount of time, Christ was carrying his cross. And then Simon of Cyrene was enlisted. Justin misses this part. On the way to Golgotha, what did Jesus do? And who was he concerned about? If you're up close, you can read it. Yeah. Don't weep for me, weep for yourselves. I done told you, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, not a stone left upon another of the temple, because of the disobedience, because you would not believe the Father, nor the Son, nor the Holy Spirit. So even as he's facing death, even as he's not able to carry his cross, he's thinking of others. Because his whole mission on the cross is for our benefit. And he again warns the daughters of Jerusalem. Daily Bible readers. Thank you.